and welcome to MEE Live. I'm Mathilda Mallinson. It's Tuesday, the 30th of June, 2026. Today, how Iran won the World Cup, or didn't lose it anyway. Iran was knocked out of the World Cup on Saturday, yet the government's now calling it a victory. Whether or not it's the moral victory, they say, a tidal wave of international support points to a plausible PR victory. Iran's football fate was sealed by two 96th-minute plot twists, earning them the headline title of Unluckiest team in World Cup history. But global commentators hit back hard. Not luck, they said, but sabotage, discrimination, corruption by the hosting USA. From visas to VAR, Iran's World Cup was marred from the start with allegations of unjust treatment. At the hands of a host country, it was forced to play in on the very same day it dropped bombs on their own. Plus, a football federation that invented a peace prize for the president ordering those bombs.
But actually, FIFA did nothing. Our logistic doesn't hear. Yeah, you see, we don't have media. Our media. Where is our media? You can check. No media here. No media, no, I don't know, kitmans, no one.
Was Iran the unluckiest team in World Cup history or the worst treated? And while the Iranian team lost the battle on the pitch, did they score a bigger victory on the geopolitical playing field? Here to talk football and politics is MEE journalist Rayhan Uddin. Rayhan, welcome back. Now, I don't know how common it is during the World Cup for international audiences to rally behind Iran of all teams. But on Saturday, we saw outrage from all corners of the internet and the world at the departure of this underdog team. So we have to ask, how much has this got to do with the unresolved US-led war on Iran? What are the parallels?
Well, Matilda, there certainly are parallels. You know, as with politics and negotiations and conflict even, it's not always about what happens on the battlefield or in this instance on the pitch. Sometimes it's also about the narrative war or the narrative victory, and it's about PR and who has won off it as well. And I think with regards to narrative, when it comes to what happened to Iran at the World Cup, there was this perception of things being stacked against Iran, whether that was on the pitch with VAR decisions and various things that went against them, which we'll unpack later today, or off the pitch with regards to travel restrictions, visas, and the politicization of the World Cup itself. There was this perception of Iran going up against well-financed, larger countries and coming away from it not having lost. Iran were the only team to have not lost a game and gone out of the tournament. Every other team that didn't lose a game made it to the last 32. Iran didn't. And this kind of almost makes them somewhat of the martyr of the World Cup. You know, they were wronged in some ways. They were ultimately doomed, but they were resilient, and in the end they didn't lose. And to some extent, actually, the government and Iranian political figures are playing into that narrative war. And I'm going to give you two examples of that. One of them is Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister. A few days ago, after the game against Belgium, where Iran defended really, really well, he wrote on X, "From the football pitch to the negotiating table to the battlefield, every step we take as Iranians is a part of a larger struggle, defending the honor and dignity of our dear people." And then that was followed by the hashtag Minab168 to do with the schoolgirls that were killed in a US-Israeli strike. Now that tweet was accompanied with a picture of the Iranian goalkeeper and the defenders keeping out a Belgian attack, and then a sort of AI image of the girls as angels kind of protecting the ball. So it was a very specific analogy between defending against a Belgian attack and also defending against the US and defending against greater powers, you know, attacking Iran. So they've very clearly made the link. And similarly, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, the chief negotiator and Iran's Speaker of Parliament, put out a very similar picture with the caption, "This is how we protect our land." So that connection is being made where, in effect, Iran may not have been victorious. They may not have kind of made it to the next round of the World Cup, but they didn't lose. They didn't lose on the pitch, literally, but they also kind of won hearts and minds and gained respect from many different corners of the world.
So the government is clearly trying to draw this direct line between what happened on the World Cup stage and what's been happening on the stage of the war. I suppose the question then is, did the public see the same analogy? Let's unpack it a little bit more. Starting on the pitch, how did this injustice narrative play out?
Yeah, so there were a few injustice narratives on the pitch. One of the main ones was to do with refereeing decisions and VAR, and this idea that Iran were kind of wronged by these decisions. They should have won and didn't in the end. And two main decisions. One was an incredible free kick routine that they had against Belgium, which would have been a sensational goal, but was ruled out basically because a backside was ruled to be offside. And then a very similar decision. There's been a lot of conspiratorial talk around, these were deliberate decisions to keep Iran out. As an objective football watcher who's watched quite a lot of the games in the World Cup, both of them were offside. They were very marginal calls, very, very unlucky.
I have to say, last night, the reason I probably look so tired is because I was up very late last night watching Paraguay versus Germany, because I have Paraguay in the Middle East Eye sweepstake that
I've
you
got New
organised.
Zealand. I was knocked out a long time ago.
Well, I prevailed. Paraguay prevailed, and the main reason for that, arguably, was a very, very harsh VAR decision that saw a Germany goal revoked. So I suppose
that one was a lot more controversial.
Oh, really?
yeah. Whereas these Iranian ones, I think, were a bit more clear cut. It wasn't just VAR. The other kind of cries of conspiracy came down to the final game of the group stages between Algeria and Austria. And because Iran finished in third place, there was a system where the best third place teams would make it to the next round. And Iran were hoping for the game between Algeria and Austria not to be a draw. Anything but a draw, a win for Austria or a win for Algeria would have taken Iran through.
Right.
Now that game did end in a draw. It ended in a 3-3 draw. And it was a very sort of dramatic, quite controversial game. There were large parts of that game where Algeria were just knocking the ball around and Austria weren't really doing anything. They weren't trying to get the ball off Algeria, and it looked as if both teams were very happy to just play out a draw and go through to the next round. And that wasn't helped by the fact that Riyad Mahrez, Algeria's star winger, went out to the media after the game and he said that scoring the goal to make it 3-2 to Algeria was awkward, and that when Austria went and scored in the last minute to make it 3-3, that was good for them, and that both teams qualifying was the most important thing today.
I know it was a bit awkward, to be honest. We were playing wide and they were sitting. At the last minute, someone plays a ball inside and it turns. I have to make the run. I have to respect football, and the ball arrives in front of the keeper. I have to score. I have to try to score. Like they tried to score as well. They were in front. They were winning 2-1. I know it's an awkward situation, but it's football. I have to respect it, and the good thing is, the good thing for them is they score and they qualify. We both qualify, and it's the most important thing today.
That has made the kind of conspiracies go wild, because I thought on the pitch it didn't necessarily look all that deliberate. Just those kind of comments afterwards plant a seed of doubt. Mm-hmm. People have called it the disgrace of Kansas City, and they're comparing it to a match in 1982, which was known as the disgrace of Gihon, when a very similar thing happened, but it was actually Algeria that were on the receiving end of it. Austria and West Germany played out a clear, deliberate 1-0 win to West Germany, which meant that Algeria went out. So people were comparing it to that. Now, again, I would say that having watched the game, if they were playing for a deliberate draw, they probably would have played for a 0-0 or a 1-1. Playing for a 3-3 draw in which the sixth and final goal is the last touch of the game, when the referee could have easily blown the whistle, seems like a sort of incredibly risky way to play out a deliberate 3-3 draw.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I don't know
we'll
a whole lot
never
about
know.
football, but that seems to be the case. I'm learning a lot about football in this
it
discussion.
seems unlikely. Whereas the kind of Gijón thing was a 1-0 win and they just didn't do anything after that. This one, if it was deliberate, well, they played it rather risky.
I mean, the thing is, even if global audiences are looking for perceptions of injustice, you know, even where they may not be there, that says something about the mindset of the global commentators, I suppose. But if the injustices on the pitch were actually maybe just unfair, the case for injustice off the pitch during the US-hosted World Cup is stronger. Remind us what happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to things that Iran faced off the pitch, you know, this wasn't conspiracy or unlucky or anything like that. These were things that tangibly occurred and impacted Iran's experience and ability to play. So even before the war broke out, you know, Iran have long faced sanctions from the US and by extension from other countries in the world that have always made it difficult for sports and for various different sectors of the Iranian economy and of Iranian society. Now, that was all exacerbated by the war which Israel and the US launched in late February. Firstly, the Iranian team didn't even know if they were going to compete at the World Cup. As bombs were falling on Iran, there was a lot of chat about, will Iran be allowed to compete? Will they be safe to compete? Is there enough security for the Iranian team to go to a country that is at war with their country and to feel like they are able to kind of move around and be safe and participate in this global tournament? So there was already a lot of doubt about Iran's participation in the first place. Then it was kind of confirmed that Iran would be going, and at the very last moment, in the last few days before the World Cup started, Iran's training base was moved from Arizona in the US to Tijuana in Mexico. Now, all three of Iran's games were in America. So not only were they training in Tijuana in Mexico instead of Arizona, but they were also traveling in from Tijuana to LA for the first two games a day before the games themselves, which gave them very little time for training, for preparation, and for recovery as well. That was really stacked against them. The other thing was the ticket allocation that was given to every single team, you know, to bring their own fans from their country to come and support the team. The Iranian authorities said that ticket allocation was revoked shortly before the tournament, so their fans were unable to come and support the team. Now, whether those fans would have been allowed in the first place, highly unlikely, because Iranians face massive difficulties going to the US because of sanctions which existed from well before the war anyway. And as we know from this tournament, teams from Asia, the Middle East, Africa have faced massive difficulties with being allowed into the US to support their team. So whether their allocation was revoked or not, it would have been very, very difficult for any Iranians not already in the US to have gone to these games. So, and that makes a difference. You know, if your fans aren't there cheering you on, it's very difficult to win these games. And also Iranian officials that are part of the Football Association were also denied entry into the US, and so they had to just watch the games on TV in Mexico whilst the games were taking place. And there's a quote from a White House official who said, "There are some people that claim they are coaches that may not be coaches." Who he was referring to or what that means, you know, they didn't really elaborate too much on that. But, you know, not having some of your backroom staff being able to be there on the sidelines of the pitch with you, again, makes a difference. So, you know, whilst there might have been sort of perceived injustices off the pitch, there were definitely actual injustices and things that were obstacles that Iran faced off the pitch. And as a result of that, you know, that narrative of them having to come against barriers and still coming away not being defeated, getting these 3 draws, left them feeling like their heads were held high after it.
Right. Yeah, I can see that those factors would quite clearly handicap a team. However, it wouldn't be accurate, I suppose, to say that the only hostility came from the US authorities. When the team first arrived to play in LA, they were met with active hostility from LA's prominent Iranian diaspora. Many of them were there not to support the team, but to protest the government in Tehran. Some of this was echoed online. Here's one comment from an Iranian online accusing players of selective morality. They ask, when the regime cracks down, where are they? Silent. When the people rise, where are they? Silent.
Well, yes, it was an incredibly tense atmosphere in the first 2 games, and that, this was complete coincidence, but they happened to be playing their first 2 games in LA, home to large numbers of Iranian diaspora, many of whom are anti-government. And so that added another layer of interest and intrigue to this match. And it created a very tense environment. We saw lots and lots of clips online of some of these anti-government Iranians coming up to other fans during the game or outside the stadium that were waving the Iranian flag, the kind of Islamic Republic of Iran flag, swearing at them, accusing them of being sympathizers for the Iranian government. We saw lots of people waving the pre-revolutionary flag with the lion on it, which FIFA had actually banned from being taken into the stadiums, but they were taken in somehow anyway, and there were lots of images of people waving that flag. The team bus was chased by some of these protesters who were kind of swearing at the players. The national anthem was booed. And there were even cases of Iranians supporting New Zealand and supporting Belgium because they don't support the Islamic Republic. And obviously, this wasn't true of all the Iran fans that were at these games. There were many fans that were there that were supportive of the team. But it is very true to say that there were many fans there that were kind of accusing other fans and accusing the players, of being IRGC and terrorist sympathizers and kind of sympathizers for the Iranian authorities. Now, I don't think that's a completely accurate image of those players. Just to give you one example, Mehdi Taremi, the big star of the Iranian football team, in January, he scored a goal for his club Olympiakos in Greece, and he refused to celebrate. And he later explained that that was because of his solidarity with the Iranian people that at the time were taking to the streets. There were anti-government protests that were brutally cracked down by Iranian authorities. And he expressed his solidarity with those protesters. And even during this World Cup, he gave his jersey I think it was after the New Zealand game, to a fan who was clearly waving the pre-revolutionary flag. That's probably something that the Iranian authorities wouldn't have been too pleased about, seeing their star player kind of giving his jersey to a fan that probably doesn't believe in the existence of the Islamic Republic. But I think it just shows the kind of nuances and diversity of opinion within the team. Ali Dai is a very famous Iranian player. He scored the most goals ever for Iran, and he's a very well-known critic of the government and came out in support of the protests in 2022. And there's also the case of Sardar Azmoun, who is one of the most famous current players, who has been left out of the squad. And there are allegations that was because of his disloyalty to Iran. So all that just shows that it's not as clear-cut as you play for the Iranian team, therefore you support the Iranian government. It's a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more diversity of opinion. And just like other parts of Iranian culture, whether it's film, singers, there is a lot of kind of diversity of opinion among the kind of cultural figures in Iran.
Yeah, we tend to homogenize, but that's not reflective of reality. I suppose, though, whatever the players think or want or do, the government was always going to capitalise on this World Cup for propaganda. I can see why that would be a concern to its critics, but it doesn't necessarily require the government to impose its own narrative for the wider public to join the dots themselves. So my final question then is, I suppose, has it worked? Was the World Cup a relevant PR victory for Iran in the wider scheme of the war?
Well, in terms of PR for Iran, I think it's unquestionable that there was a lot of positive PR around all those things that we've discussed, all the sort of injustices, perceived and real. But Iran were just relatively well received as well. You know, as we discussed, they stayed in Mexico the whole time, and there's lots of videos of Mexicans queuing up to take selfies with Mehdi Taremi and other players. Very endearing videos. You know, the Mexicans really warmed to the Iranian team. There's also a lot of clips of Iranians doing interviews after games that have gone very, very viral, particularly those that were in English. There was one of the midfielder Ramin Rezaein, who was repeatedly asked questions about politics, about the protesters, the Iranian protesters in LA, and he kind of hit back and said, any problems, that's for us to deal with. That's for us Iranians to deal with among each other. And he literally said, that's none of your business to the reporter. And that went very viral, and people were quite pleased to hear him kind of hit back. And similarly, there was an interview with Mehdi Taremi after the Egypt game where he said, we respect all LGBT people, because he was asked about that.
Yeah.
That game coincided with some Pride activities that were taking place in Seattle as part of Pride Month.
In our religion doesn't accept that, but we respect all of the LGBT people. That's their own idea. It's not about us. We are here to play football. We respect all of those guys. Yeah, if you have a question about the game, I will answer.
These kind of interviews where they're asked about political and social issues, though, created a lot of chatter online about why are Iranian footballers expected to come out here and talk about LGBT.
Yeah, because I saw that clip from Taremi where he said, yes, we support all LGBT people.
Yeah.
If you have any questions about the game, I'm here to answer those.
Yeah, exactly. And Trevor Noah had a good segment of his podcast where he talks about Middle East teams, Iran in particular, are expected to talk about the state of the world and all these issues that are kind of beyond what they're there to do. Whereas, you know, how often would you see the US team being asked about ICE and being asked about Trump's policies, or European teams being asked about Islamophobia or the rise of the far right? It's almost never going to happen, right? It seems very unlikely that something like that's going to happen, but there's this perception that Iran were being held to a different standard, and yet they spoke very, very articulately, and a lot of these clips went viral off the back of quite difficult questions. So I think all of that together, you know, the performances in the interviews, the performances on the pitch and not having lost, and all the cards being stacked against them, meant that, you know, we can't conclude that Iran won the World Cup. They obviously didn't. They're out of the tournament, but they may well have won the narrative World Cup.
And I think, as with the World Cup, the sort of irony of the US's approach to the war is that the displays of US brute force sort of caused, well, a rallying around the flag inside Iran, from what we've heard from a lot of guests, and a growing sympathy for the country from outside Iran. The lesson from both is people root for the underdog, not for the bully. Yeah,
I mean, there are, again, comparisons, like we mentioned at the beginning. You know, the US was seen as a bit of a bully with Israel for going into the war. Similarly, if a team's going to travel to your country and you're the host of the World Cup and you're stopping their officials from being able to enter the country, you're giving them 1 day to prepare for matches, you're revoking the ability of their fans to come and participate. For Iran and for lots of other teams, is definitely a PR failure for the US.
Rayhan Uddin, thank you so much for joining me here today. And to all of you watching, thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, make sure you're following us on social media at Middle East Eye. You can email meelive@middleeasteye.net. I'll be here live at 5 every Tuesday and Thursday, noon if you're in New York. See you then.